Okay, so sandwiched between our two lovely ladies is Jameson Gregg. Now, we have so much fun producing a novel idea, you guys. We meet all kinds of interesting people, fun people. We laugh among ourselves. And you know, when Wayne Boston went and asked Jameson Gregg to appear, the first thing Wayne said is, "So Jameson, are you on Instagram?" I said, "No, I'm on Metamucil." You gotta love it. So seriously, Jameson was born in Mississippi, and as a school kid, his family ripped him out and moved to, gosh, the Golden Isles on the east coast of Georgia. Tough move. After graduating from Glenn Academy High School in Brunswick, Georgia, he returned to Mississippi for 2 degrees. In 1983, he earned a law degree where he came to his senses and returned back to the Golden Isles, where he practiced in Brunswick and St. Simon for 20 years. So, along with Metamucil, Jameson likes pain. He's an avid runner, yay, Colorado mountain biker, and an African safari participant. But Jameson also likes to win awards. He's won the fiction contest from the Georgia Bar Journal, Georgia Author of the Year from the Georgia Writers Association, and a Snoopy winner of the Northeast Georgia Writers Group. And that's just a few. So, without further ado, let us give Jameson Gregg a wonderful novel idea welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda, for that fine introduction. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here tonight, and when I say here, I mean safely inside the vintage pizzeria and not out driving in that crazy traffic of ours, because it's gotten nuts out there. Let me tell you what happened to me. Yesterday, I was on 285 East, not too far from here. It was morning rush hour traffic. And we were bumper to bumper, and we were going about 80 miles an hour, and I thought that was too fast. So I pumped my brakes a few times, and I looked in the rearview mirror, and I could see the car starting to back up. But then this morning, about the same time, 285 East, morning rush hour traffic, the log jam from yesterday still had not cleared up. And like everybody else, I started honking my horn, and I realized I was honking at myself. That's how bad it's gotten out there. So yes, I'm happy to be here, and I thank each one of you for coming. And I want to thank the organizers of the novel idea, Jeremy Logan, and all the others who come together to put together this event. It's a great service to the literary community, and it's great for writers and readers. So thank you, and thanks to Vintage Pizzeria for the venue. Now I want to ask, is there anyone else other than me here who gets a little nervous when you get up to speak in public? Anybody else? Well, they say that type of nervousness ages you faster than normal. And I'm kind of cognizant of this idea, and I've given over 50 talks since I published my first book. And so I keep track of myself in the mirror, and I can see a few signs of aging, but I don't think most people can tell. I think I look okay for a 35-year-old. Now, actually, I'm in my late 50s. So late, in fact, that I recently turned 60. And even more recently than that, I turned 65. And I don't consider myself a senior citizen. You know, in my heart, I'm still a teenager. But these telltale signs keep popping up. My grandchildren, for instance, boom, telltale sign, you know, gray hair and Medicare. You know, it's no coincidence that they rhyme because they come about the same time in life. Telltale signs. A couple of months ago, when it was warmer, I walked to my mailbox barefooted, and my neighbor happened to be at his mailbox at the same time. and he looked down at my feet and complimented me on my alligator shoes. So anyway, enough about aging. I need to get on with my talk. I'm not getting any younger up here. So what I would like to do is, I want to do a reading from my first book, Luck Be a Chicken, a comic novel. And then I want to tell you a little bit about my writing journey. And then do a reading from my second book, Uncorked and Off the Chain, Offbeat Ramblings of a Zany Comic. So, Luck Be a Chicken, a comic novel. And this was my first book, and it won for me Georgia Author of the Year. This book, I like to say it's a story about a fantastically redneck South Georgia family, Butterbean and Ruby Sweat. And the book deals with some serious issues, such as generational poverty, corporate greed and corruption, and the cleanliness of our food supply. But Butterbean and Ruby, they get through all their trials and tribulations with humor. And so in the scene I'm going to read to you, Bean drives a forklift for the Majestic Chicken Plant, and he can never seem to find a good assistant forklift driver. And in this scene, Wilbur, the plant manager of Majestic Chicken, is delivering to Bean the newest candidate for the job of assistant forklift driver. And this is a performance reading, verbatim, beginning on page 82. "I got a man here to drive for you," Wilbur said. "His name is Jesus." The well-postured man of medium height was light-skinned for a Latino. His black hair trimmed his shoulders, and a thick beard hedged his chin. His clothes were threadbare but clean. The new man smiled and nodded as Bean looked him up and down. "How you spell that?" "'Fraid he don't speak too much English," Wilbur said. "He spells it J-E-S-U-S, like in the Bible." "You mean Jesus is coming to work at Majestic Chicken?" "He ain't Jesus," Wilbur said. "He's Jesus. I wish he was Jesus." "Well, how you make a hay out of a J?" "Beats me, Sweat. Take it up with Mexico. Now, Job Center says he can drive a lift, so all you got to do is show him what to do." "Well, I guess I have to show him because I damn sure can't tell him now, can I? How long's he been driving?" "I don't know, Bean. Ask him. Look, you need to finish cleaning because we're probably going live after lunch. Now, I gotta go." Wilbur whirled and shuffled away. Bean sized up Jesus. Clear, intelligent eyes. Sincere and agreeable attitude. Seemed anxious to work. Bean felt an odd compulsion to show this man respect. "Buenos dias. Mi nombre es Butterbean Sweat. Mucho gusto. ¿Estás de Mexico?" "Sí, Señor Sweat. Soy de Veracruz." "Ah." Bean remembered with great fondness last week's special at Amigo Gordo restaurant, Chili Rianos del Veracruz. This fella can't be all bad. Bean walked him over to the second Nissan forklift and pointed. "You know how to drive this?" He pretended to hold his hands on the wheel, turning left and right. "Sí, Señor Sweat." Bean released the key from his belt ring, tossed it to the new man, pointed to an open area, and twirled his wrist. "Drive around this area and do some stop and goes and turns, comprehendo?" "Sí." In seamless movements, Jesus mounted and cranked her. She beeped when he threw it into reverse. Then she glided like an ice dancer, cutting flawless geometric loop-de-loop patterns, backward and forward, curving in perfect concentric circles. Bean's jaw dropped. "The smoothest thing on a forklift I ever seen." A tear welled up. Jesus glided the lift to a stop beside Bean, stepped down and nodded. Bean tried to gather his composure. He started to speak, stopped himself, and stood in awkward silence. Finally, he stepped close to Jesus and whispered, "Are you really Jesus? Like Christ? In the Bible? Who come back like you said you would?" Jesus smiled and shrugged. No comprendo. Oh, come on, you can tell me. I won't tell nobody. I always knew you was real. I swear I did. And I know you'd sneak back when we wasn't watching, but I didn't think you'd be driving no forklift in a chicken plant. Jesus shook his head. No comprendo, Senor Sweat. Bean noticed genuine confusion in the man's face. The real Jesus would know English, I'm pretty sure. Thank you. Thank you. And that idea, to me, for a performance reading, came from Jeremy Logan and Brenda Sefcik. They came up to Gainesville a couple of years ago, and they spoke to the Northeast Georgia Writers Group. I plead the fifth on that one. Anyway, they did a performance reading from the book they wrote together, and that's the first time I had seen it. So thank you guys for turning me on to the idea. So I'm going to pivot and talk about my writing journey for a minute. And even though I spent most of my life in Georgia, I'm from Mississippi, and I went to Ole Miss. And when I got to Ole Miss, I discovered a whole other world full of avant-garde journalism and literature. Until then, I had really only read things that had been assigned to us by my teacher. And when I got to college, I started reading outside the classroom. And I fell in love with great writing and with the concept that I, too, was going to be a writer one day. But I had a torn heart. I would have loved to have been a writer right from the get-go. But I wanted to have a family, and I didn't want to live in a hovel, so I majored in business. Now, I'm going to tell you about some of the odd jobs I had during college. And I like to say these affected my worldview, and they certainly affected my writing. I was a deckhand on a Mississippi River tugboat. I drove a taxi. I was a traveling circus promoter. Now, I was not a trapeze artist, Mark. And I was an iceman in a chicken plant. And lo and behold, 30 years later, that is one of the settings for luck be a chicken. So you never know. You just never know. And I do want to say that if somebody wrote in great detail about what goes on in a chicken plant, it would gross the reader out. So from that standpoint, this is chicken plant light. So I then went to law school. I graduated from Mississippi College School of Law, and I moved, as Brenda mentioned, to St. Simon's Island, and I had a law practice in Brunswick, Georgia. Had a successful 20-year law practice, but during those law practice days, I wanted to write. That seed that had been planted in me to be a writer kept growing, but I just couldn't find the time to feed it. I had a very busy law practice. Now, we were raising 3 children, and one of them is here tonight, living proof. So we were raising 3 children, and I was very active in the community. Now, I was chairman of a bank, so I did not have time to write. So after 20 years, my heart overruled my mind, and I retired from my law practice at the height of my career to pursue this passion for writing. Life is short. I moved to Dahlonega, and it took about 4.5 years to write Luck Be a Chicken, over a year to get it published. And I'm very fortunate and humbled that the book won Georgia Author of the Year. And the judge, in her critique of the book, she wrote that the writing is reminiscent of Twain and a must-read for Foxworthy fans. Since I won that award, speaking requests became rolling in, and no doubt had something to do with me standing here right now. I delivered a commencement address to the University of North Georgia, and I've got news that you're the first group that I've been able to tell this to. I just signed a contract with HBO. Yep. I pay them $19 a month. I get to watch all the movies I want to. But I did give that commencement address. I've won other awards. My works have appeared in literary journals, newspapers, and magazines. and I won other awards. And one that I'm proud of that Brenda mentioned is my short story won the Georgia Bar Journal 27th Annual Fiction Writing Competition. And it was the first time in the awards history that a humor story won the award. Very, very pleased about that, especially since there are over 45,000 members of the Georgia Bar. And we all know how lawyers like to write. Sometimes people ask me, why humor? Why humor? And I don't know, maybe it's inherited. And my grandmother and mother were both very funny people, and they loved playing practical jokes. And I've had this urge all my life to try to make people laugh. I don't know why. Maybe it's because laughter releases all those wonderful feel-good endorphins in our body. And there's so many beneficial effects. Chief among them is to help us deal with stress and anxiety. But there's so many other benefits. And there have been hundreds of studies on the topic of the benefits of stress, the benefits of humor to release stress, not stress. Y'all knew what I was talking about. So that brings me to my second book, Uncorked and Off the Chain, Offbeat Ramblings of a Zany Comic. And this is 175 standalone short humor pieces. And I like to say with this book that I am delivering humor and satire with chops and attitude. And I say right there in the front, reader discretion not advised. And I'm going to read the story to you entitled Vladimir Putin. And unfortunately, that's a very timely topic right now. And I want to tell you, though, that I have a Russian friend in my subdivision. He's a great guy. He and his wife and family immigrated here from Russia. And after I published Uncorked, I asked him if he knew how Vladimir Putin got his name. And he said he did not. And so I said, you need to read the book to find out how Vladimir Putin got his name. So I'm going to read this piece, and then when I finish, I'm going to tell you his reaction to it. Vladimir Putin, and of course Putin is spelled P-U-T-I-N. Did you know that some Slavic naming customs mirror those of some American Indian tribes? Little known facts about the birth of Russia's President Vladimir Putin and his naming rights recently came to light. In the Vladimir tribe, the first name, Vladimir, is everyone's family moniker, and the last name is given. The given one is determined much like those with Indian handles, such as running water and hopping rabbit. Records reveal that the night before the birth of the future president, his father, Vladimir Putin, ate a double order of the chef's special navy bean stew down at the Hammer and Sickle Cafe. Upon the birth of the new Vladimir the next morning, in keeping with tradition, Mom held up their new baby and instructed Dad to walk outside and observe the first thing that came to his mind. Timing was critical. Dad knew Mom detested flatulence, so he had held in his gas through the whole ordeal. Bloated like a drowned pig and on the verge of puking, he sprinted outside and proceeded to blow the trumpet for 5 solid minutes. The newborn's name was obvious to Dad, but he knew Mom loathed terse, foul language, so Vladimir Fartin wouldn't work. What is our baby boy's name? Asked Mom as Dad sauntered through the door, beaming relief. Vladimir Putin, and that's P-O-O-T-I-N. Vladimir Putin, and he will rise to greatness. And as so often happens in Russia, the clerk at the birth certificate bureau misspelled the name on the form, and that, my friends, is how Vladimir Putin got his name. Now that these facts are public knowledge, I suggest our United Nations ambassador call Putin out on it, right there on the floor of the UN. How can we take seriously a man named after an intestinal gust of wind? Putin's world influence will plunge. Russia won't bother us anymore. Boom, problem solved. Thank you. So I saw my Russian friend. Next time I saw him, I said, "Do you now know the answer?" And he was pretty excited about it. He said, "You crazy." He said, "That's not how Vladimir Putin got his name. You crazy, you crazy." Well, apparently he didn't get it that it was humor and satire. You know, they may not have much of that in Russia these days. But maybe he did get it right that I am a little crazy. Because I tell you, writing humor is so hard, it's not funny. You know, it takes quirky, unconventional thinking. So being a little crazy helps, believe me. So I want to end my comments by taking the liberty of giving you each a personal word of advice. I like to give a takeaway to my audiences when I speak. And this relates to the fact that I think many of us work too hard. You know, we don't take time to smell the roses. I think everybody should find a good hobby and enjoy it. When I lived on St. Simon's Island, I took up scuba diving. And one day my instructor said, "If you're on an outing and you get cold, just pee and it'll warm you up for a minute." Well, I thought that was rather disgusting. But sure enough, a couple of months ago, I was on an outing and I did it. And the good news is, yeah, it warmed me up for a minute. But the bad news is, I was golfing. So, my word of advice, your takeaway from my talk is this. Peeing yourself is not a great way to warm yourself up. But it's a great way to get kicked off the putt-putt course. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I'll be happy to entertain. Yes, ma'am.
What's your next writing adventure? Do you have something in mind?
Well, thank you for the question. Yes, I have a sequel to Uncorked and Off the Chain written. It's just, I haven't really started trying to publish it yet. And I've been working on another comic novel. I've been sketching it out for many months now. And I'm slow. A lot of people crank out a book every year, but I just can't do that. So I've got a couple of books in the works, and I've got about 3 unpublished books on the shelf. You know, I like to say sometimes that I'm a writer of rare books. Now, I have 3 on the shelf that are not published yet. So.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Where in Mississippi were you born, and what year did you graduate from Ole Miss?
I'm from Jackson, Mississippi,
Okay.
and I graduated Ole Miss in 1978.
I was ahead of you.
You went to Ole Miss.
I graduated in '74.
Go Rebels! All right.
Are you familiar with Yellowstone County?
I don't-
Water Valley? You don't remember?
I know I'm in Water Valley.
Yeah, that's where I'm
Oh yeah, I have friends, the Buchanans, Minor Buchanan, who live in Water Valley. Anyway,
Okay.
well, thank you. Glad to be in the same room with you. Ole Miss, we're gonna stick together. Yes, sir.
Yes, my wife and I are English, and
No.
what struck me was that your story just now about Putin was perhaps a little more English humour, which is, do you think, a little coarser than American humour, generally speaking?
I think so. I do, really do. And English humor, I mean, you guys are just the king of wit. And I love the English humor, the dry English humor. And maybe this is a little more coarse than most American humor. But,
That's what I thought it might be. Yeah.
but maybe it'd fit right in England or something like that.
I'll read it and let you know.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
He's going to put it on his Facebook.
Good. Good. Well, you now know how Vladimir Putin got his name.
He has some Russian friends.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
How do you like Dahlonega?
Well, I love Dahlonega. You know, I moved from the coast up to Dahlonega, and some people, many people have said, why in the world would you move from the coast? And I always, my pat answer is the 3 H's: heat, humidity, and hurricanes. You know, and bugs are a close fourth. But Dahlonega is such a cool little town. It's got such an atmosphere. You know, if you compare it to so many other smaller cities in North Georgia, they just, most of them don't have the character that Dahlonega does. Dahlonega has a great art scene, a great music scene in particular. They have just constantly having musical events in Dahlonega, which I think set it apart from many other towns in North Georgia. But I love Dahlonega.
Do you have Spirits Tavern?
Yes, I know Spirits.
Sabrina, Sabrina and David, she grew up next door to us. And she used to babysit my daughter. And when my daughter first met her, my daughter was 8 when we moved here, and Sabrina was 13, and we moved in next door to them. And my daughter came home, and she was so enamored of Sabrina, because she was a big girl. And she said, I met a big girl next door. Her name is Suprema.
Well, Spirits Tavern is a great little
It's a
spot,
great
and they got a great location right off the square.
Yes,
So
yes. And I'm
if
so
y'all
happy to see them.
if nobody's been to La Haga, you need to go check it out,
Yeah,
especially during Christmas time.
yeah.
So my time is up, and so I thank you once again for coming.